From one of the most popular TV shows completely changing one of their key characters, to other key differences that have only helped make the show that much better, this is the powerful change that HBO made to Sam in The Last of Us. One of our favorite shows of 2023 is quickly evolving into something amazing that has captured the attention of millions of viewers worldwide. Impressive, right? Of course, we're talking about HBO's The Last of Us. Now, if you haven't yet seen this show, are you living under a rock or something? Everyone is completely and utterly engrossed in the tale of Joel, played by actor Pedro Pascal. Joel is escorting Ellie, who is played by Bella Ramsey, across the pandemic-ravaged United States, while at the same time trying to fend off an onslaught of flesh-eating zombies. Sounds interesting, right? Well, it definitely is. There's a lot of hype surrounding this show, mostly because it's based on the hugely popular video game of the same name. It's no surprise that the TV version is producing insane ratings. There's one question in the back of everyone's mind, especially for those who have played the video game. How much of the TV series has actually been inspired by the video game? We know it's just a game, but it has a very in-depth storyline, one that initially drew fans to the original concept. While the majority of things have stayed the same, there are also plenty of differences. Firstly, and probably one of the most powerful, Sam's character in The Last of Us underwent a huge change. The reason for this alteration has finally been made clear to fans. In the video game, Joel and Ellie stumble across brothers Henry and Sam while in Pittsburgh. Only one half of the party from each pair manages to escape the city alive, ultimately being forced to flee the city like the plague. In the show version, things are slightly different. First of all, Henry and Sam's dynamic is pretty different, but the main objective and result remain basically the same. Sam has leukemia and is deaf in the show, which is a massive change, but one that feels extremely necessary for this adaptation. Also, did you know that the actor who plays Sam, Kevon Woodard, is actually deaf in real life? We love to see actual representation, especially when it comes to disabilities. It's pretty awesome that he has the opportunity to play this kind of role, and because he is deaf in real life, he plays the role to perfection. But as we were saying, in a very recent podcast of the official Last of Us podcast, showrunner Craig Mazin explained why he decided to make the big change for Sam's character. He said he wanted to distinguish Sam and Henry from Joel and Ellie. Why? Well, ultimately it was because of how much they resemble one another. He said that since the show will be concentrating on Sam and Henry before they meet the main characters, it would seem even more repetitive if they spoke in a similar tone. They are instead compelled to be more private and quiet because they're using sign language instead. Mazin also mentioned that he was motivated after watching a different show. Two deaf characters in the show had to communicate using sign language. Additionally, the reason Sam was made somewhat younger is because they needed this character to be able to look up to Ellie, like a role model type of figure. It's actually quite a clever idea to modify anything for this adaptation. The similarities between the two groups are already obvious, but now there's something that sets them apart, allowing them to shine as individuals, resulting in a much more entertaining and memorable viewing experience. Because the change is so profound, it allows a lot more room for a closer and deeper bond between the two, something that allows viewers to become even more attached to the show. Although Henry and Sam were always destined to die just as they did in the game, HBO's adaptation goes into additional detail about their journey to make it even more heartbreaking. Speaking of differences, what other notable differences are there between the show and the video game? Well, probably one of the biggest and most obvious has to be Bill and Frank's romantic relationship, which unfolds in the third episode of the show titled Long, Long Time. Now, this episode caused quite the stir, especially given how much of the plot was changed from the original game. In the third episode, Bill and Frank's romantic relationship was the main subject, but in the game version, while still there, it received a lot less attention. So, how was it received? Well, for the most part, great. However, despite the episode's enormous fan base and critical acclaim, some viewers review-bombed the show due to its portrayal of a same-sex relationship. Sometimes it feels like we're still living way too far in the past, don't you think? Speaking on this change, Showrunner Craig Mazin said that Bill and Frank's relationship was meant to influence viewers' impressions of all other relationships in the show. How so? Well, the intention, according to him, was to demonstrate how these two very different individuals, who have various ideas about what it means to be in love, can still coexist in a partnership. He explained, "We develop a sort of thematic codex for the entire performance through their relationship and their two distinct forms of love, both inner and outward. From that point on, it seems like there's a little bit of a Bill and Frank in every relationship we encounter." Aw, it's pretty sweet when you think about it. And similarly to Bill and Frank's differences, the timeline for the show is drastically different from the video game. Now, we know that the deadly fungus outbreak in the game that ultimately causes the modern apocalypse starts in the present day, or the year the game was released, 2013 to be exact. There is a time jump, which means the story then takes place in 2032. On the other hand, the show takes place in the year 2023. The show has a sense of immediacy as a result, feeling as urgent and terrible as the current real-life pandemic we've all just suffered through. Additionally, HBO's The Last of Us is more so set on an alternate timeline to our own. If our pandemic started with diseased crops in Indonesia rather than an outbreak in China, it would almost feel like we were living The Last of Us reality. Minus the flesh-eating zombies, of course. Last but not least, the introduction to one of the main characters, Sarah, is very different in the show versus the game. Sarah is Joel's preteen daughter, who is introduced to us for the first time on the eve of the breakout. Only a few scenes before Sarah's heartbreaking demise do we see the depth of emotion between father and daughter since the crisis had already started. Now, in terms of the show, we have considerably more time to comprehend their dynamic and fall in love with her. We observe Sarah and Joel at the breakfast table. We see Sarah taking notes in class, almost sidetracked by the twitching of a classmate. We also see them celebrate Joel's birthday. Intimate father-daughter moments that only add to how horrifying the next moments feel. Finally, we witness one of the most unnerving, horrifying early bouts between Sarah and her infected neighbor. These extra sequences give the action that follows, which is practically a frame-for-frame recreation of the PlayStation game. There's plenty of momentum and depth. They didn't have to make many changes to Sarah's origin narrative. Her story was already amazing, but tragic. But they added the perfect amount, enough to increase the pain's visceral quality. Cleverly done. So, from the very powerful change made to the character Sam in the TV version of Last of Us, to other major differences between the game and the show, this is everything you need to know and more.